King's Landing was not kind to men like Eddard Stark. The sun scorched his skin, and the air reeked of sweat and deceit. He sat alone in the dark cell beneath the Red Keep, the echoes of his own decisions keeping him company. Varys had visited him that morning again, whispering of choices, of children, of the value of life over honor, and for once the words took root. Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, had always believed in doing what was right, not what was easy. But today, the right thing could cost his daughters their lives. Sansa was still trapped in the lion's den. Arya was missing, and the North would burn if he held to his truth. So he did it. When the crowd gathered before the Sept of Baelor, expecting a man broken but proud, they instead found a man who had surrendered. Cersei's smile was a blade across her face. Joffrey smirked with sadistic pleasure, and the High Septon nodded solemnly. I, Eddard Stark, his voice rasped, confessed to treason. I plotted against King Joffrey, and I now see my mistake. He is the true heir. Long may he reign. A gasp moved through the crowd like a wave. People whispered, confused. The man who had once stood against the Queen now kneeled. A man broken, yes, but not beaten. Cersei was pleased. She'd get her way. Sansa's pleading had worked. Ned would be sent to the wall. The North would calm. The secret of Joffrey's illegitimacy would die here. But Joffrey had other plans. I don't care what he said, the boy king sneered. A traitor is a traitor. Seer Ilyn, bring me his head. The world froze. Even Cersei turned to him in disbelief. Joffrey, she hissed, but he raised his hand. The guards obeyed. Ned's eyes widened not from fear, but from fury. He had bent the knee. For what? Screams erupted. Sansa fainted. Arya, hidden in the crowd, watched it all. But this time, something changed. Before the sword could fall, a shadow moved, a blade flashed. Yoren of the Night's Watch, who had kept Arya close, lunged forward. Chaos erupted. In the confusion, Arya vanished into the city's underbelly. Ned was dragged back, bleeding, but alive, a shallow cut across his neck. Cersei panicked. Get him out of here. Send him to the wall now, before the boy changes his mind again. And thus, Ned Stark lived in it as a lord, but as a ghost sent to the frozen ends of the world. A man whose name had been burned in the south, but still held power in the north. He had confessed. He had given up everything. But the war was just beginning. The ship bound for Eastwatch by the sea was quiet except for the groan of old wood and the hiss of freezing winds. Ned Stark sat chained below deck, staring into the darkness, his body sore, his pride shattered. The wound on his neck throbbed a reminder that mercy in King's Landing was always a trap. He should have known Joffrey would never honor his word. That boy was a Lannister in all but name, and Cersei, her smirk had turned into a scream when her son ordered his death. She was losing control. That, at least, gave him some cold comfort. Ned replayed the moment over and over. The sword had begun its descent, the crowd roaring like wolves around a fresh kill. Then Yoren had burst forward like a shadow, knocking the headsman off balance. In the confusion, Arya had vanished, and Ned had been dragged away by gold cloaks. Under Cersei's panicked orders, she'd saved him not out of kindness, but desperation. A dead Ned Stark meant open war. Now he was headed to the wall, not as a warden of the North, but as a man disgraced. At Eastwatch, the Lord Commander looked down at him with wary eyes. You were meant to die, Jorah Mormont said bluntly. Why are you here? Ned didn't answer at first. What could he say? That his silence brought him shame, and his confession nearly killed him. I bent the knee, Ned said bitterly, and the gods spat in my face. Mormont nodded slowly. Then make your peace with it. Here, no one cares about past titles or false kings. You're a brother of the Night's Watch now. That's all that matters. But it did matter. Everything mattered. The North would hear the tales soon enough. He had confessed to treason. No context, no justice, just a label, a traitor. Meanwhile, far away in Winterfell, Robb Stark had already heard the rumors. A raven arrived bearing the twisted tale. Lord Eddard Stark confessed to plotting against the crown, declared Joffrey king, sentenced to the wall. Robb's hand clenched, the letter so hard it tore. He wouldn't, he muttered. Catelyn stood behind him, her face pale but sharp. He did it for Sansa, maybe for Arya too, if she's alive. He shamed our house, Robb said through gritted teeth. He protected it. No, Mother, they call him a traitor. They call us traitors. Catelyn said nothing. The North was already uneasy. Lords were whispering. Some believed Ned had lied. Others thought he had been forced. But all agreed on one thing: things would never be the same. Back at the wall, Ned watched the night settle over the frostbitten land. Ghosts howled in the distance, ravens cawed above him. And in his dreams, he saw Robert's face. He saw Lyanna's bed of blood. He heard whispers of a child, his secret. He had bent the knee to protect his daughters. But what of Jon Snow? His thoughts spiraled, haunted by truths never told. Then one night, as snow fell hard and thick, a horn sounded from the wall. 3 blasts, rangers returning. Ned limped to the gate. He saw a group of black-cloaked men staggering in half their number missing, their faces pale with horror. What happened? He asked a brother. They're coming, the ranger whispered. Dead men, and worse. The North would soon know fear again, and they would look to Winterfell. But their true warden was in exile, branded a traitor, buried in shame. And Ned Stark, he had survived the lion's den only to face an older, colder enemy. Honor had failed him. But maybe, just maybe, survival would be enough to set things right. Winter had finally begun to show its teeth. The wind at the wall wasn't just cold, was angry. It bit into bone and soul alike. Ned Stark had seen many winters in his life, but none from behind the black veil of the Night's Watch, and certainly not as a disgraced lord. He moved through the shadows of Castle Black like a ghost. The new recruits eyed him with a mix of awe and suspicion. Some whispered of the traitor lord, others of the noble fool who sacrificed everything for his daughters. But Ned kept to himself. He trained when asked. He stood the watch, and he listened to the howls beyond the wall and to the murmurs within it. Jorah Mormont summoned him one evening, near the hearth where Old Bear sat nursing a mug of sour wine. You still have family in the North, Mormont said, not looking up. Yes, Ned replied. My son rules Winterfell now, Robb. Mormont leaned forward. Ravens speak of movement. The young wolf gathers men. Karstark, Umber, Glover. They ride south. Ned blinked. To fight the Lannisters. To fight for your name. Ned sat back, stunned. But they think I betrayed the crown. Exactly, Mormont said. They know it smells wrong. So they rise not just for you, but for themselves. They remember what honor should look like. A flicker of pride touched Ned's face. Robb was doing what he couldn't. The boy was becoming the man. But if Robb rides south, Ned whispered, then Winterfell is unguarded. Mormont nodded grimly. Aye, and if what my rangers say is true, then Winterfell, being empty, is a danger greater than any Lannister army. The old bear tossed Ned a leather-wrapped scroll, brittle and half-frozen. Ned read it quickly, descriptions of walking corpses, eyes like moonlight, cold hands tearing flesh, villagers vanishing in the night. They think it's wildlings. I think it's worse, Mormont said. I need eyes. I need men who can lead. You want me to go beyond the wall? Ned asked. I want you to choose. Stay here and rot in the shame the South gave you, or earn your redemption in the only place left where honor means something. Ned stared at the flames. His knees ached. His heart felt heavier than it had during Robert's rebellion, but he nodded. I'll ride. 2 nights later, they left. A small party of black brothers, led by a former lord of Winterfell. Ghost rode beside them, Jon Snow's direwolf more silent than ever. Ned felt the boy's absence like a wound. He hadn't even seen Jon yet. When he arrived, Jon had been away ranging. Perhaps it was better that way. What would he have said? I'm not the man you thought I was. I lied to save your sisters, and now the North burns. But the cold didn't care for shame. It swallowed everything. And as they passed through the gate into the true North, Ned Stark felt something shift in the air. They weren't alone. Far to the south, in Winterfell, a raven landed on Robb's shoulder as he prepared to cross the neck. The note was short, cold, ruthless. Ned Stark lives. Sent to the wall, betrayed the crown. War is treason. Lannister Robb crushed the note. Then let them call us traitors, he growled. The lion killed my father in all but name. Let's see how they roar when the North bites back. Catelyn worried. Every raven was a gamble. Every sword raised another name to be buried. And Bran, her sweet, crippled boys sat alone in the halls of Winterfell, watched only by maesters and ravens. The North was moving. The South was readying. And in the deep beyond the wall, Ned Stark followed footsteps not made by the living. He had knelt in shame to save his blood. Now he would stand again, but not for the crown or for pride. He would stand for the North, and for what waited in the dark. The wind beyond the wall didn't whisper, screamed. It sliced through furs, through skin, through courage. Ned Stark, once Lord of Winterfell, trudged beside his brothers in black, each step a prayer that the snow beneath them didn't hide something worse. He hadn't felt fear like this since the Trident, but even that battlefield had rules. Here there were none. The forest loomed with ancient trees, branches like skeletal fingers, and every crack of ice or rustle in the dark made hands grip. Swords tighter. Ghost moved ahead silently, eyes glowing in the dim light. Ned watched the direwolf and thought of Jon. Where was the boy now? Did he know his so-called father lived? Something's wrong, muttered a brother beside him, Dallon, a ranger with a scar across his throat. The birds stopped singing 3 miles back. They pressed on until they found the village, or what was left of it. Burnt homes, blood, smeared across doorways. No corpses, just empty space where life once was. And in the center, a strange symbol drawn in frost. Spiral, unnatural, cold in a way that went deeper than snow. Ned knelt, touching the frozen earth. This isn't the work of men. No, Mormont said grimly, stepping beside him. It's them. That night, around the fire, The brothers whispered of White Walkers, creatures of ice and death, dismissed by many as ghost stories, but not anymore. The evidence was here in the silence, in the vanished blood, in the unnatural chill that clung even near the flames. And as they slept in shifts, a scream tore through the darkness. Ned woke instantly, sword drawn. A shadow moved among the trees too fast, too quiet. They found Dallen's body slumped near the perimeter, eyes wide, lips blue, no blood, just emptiness, and something else faint, tracks, like talons on ice. Back to the wall, Mormont ordered. We ride at first light. But the storm came first. A blizzard swept through with blinding fury, scattering men and sanity alike. Ned fought through snow that felt like needles, calling out names that vanished in the wind. The direwolf returned, blood on his white fur, but no wounds, just the look of a creature that had seen death and come back darker. By dawn, 5 men were missing. Only half their party remained. Mormont shook his head. If this is what's waiting in the north, we don't have time to worry about southern kings and their bloody games. Ned nodded. War is coming from the wrong direction. They returned to Castle Black with a message that would shake bones, but by then the war in the south had already begun. In the Riverlands, Robb Stark had taken the field, banners of the direwolf flying high. His eyes no longer held the hesitation of a boy. He had tasted blood, commanded charges, lost men. The young wolf, they called him. But the boy mourned alone at night, for his father, for his sisters, for the truth he didn't know. Every victory felt empty, every cheer like an echo of a tomb. Catelyn watched her son and feared what war was turning him into. She had seen it before in Brandon, in Ned, in Robert. War didn't just kill bodies, it hollowed souls. Back at the wall, Maester Aemon listened as Ned delivered the report. The dead don't stay dead, Ned said quietly. I saw things no man should see. Aemon sat in silence for a long while. I once gave up my name for peace, he said. You gave up yours for love. And now the dead come for us both. Ned looked at the old man, and something inside him shifted. No more silence, he said. Not this time. Aemon turned his blind eyes to him. What will you do? I'll write to Robb, to the north. The truth must be known about the south, about the wall, about what's coming, and about Jon. Aemon asked gently. Ned paused. That truth was heavier than any sword he had ever lifted. Not yet, he said, but soon, because the time for silence was over. The north was rising, and the dead were watching. The ink had barely dried on the letter when the Raven took flight from Castle Black. It carried more than words, it carried warning. Ned Stark's name at the bottom lent it weight, but his shame still lingered like a scar on the North's pride. At Riverrun, Robb received the message beneath a grey sky. He read it once, then again, slower. His hand trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper relief, twisted with rage. He's alive, Robb whispered. Catelyn reached for the parchment. Her eyes darted across the page. He saw the dead. They're real, so it wasn't just ghost stories, Robb said. The walkers live. The northern lords in the war tent reacted with murmurs, disbelief curdling into fear. The Umbers argued it was distraction. The Karstarks demanded vengeance still for their slain kin. But the Greatjon roared loudest. We ride on Tywin Lannister, or we die wondering what might have been. But Robb was quiet, staring at the edge of the tent, thinking not of Lannister or dead kings but of Jon. Ned's letter didn't mention him. But it didn't have to. His absence was a message. The boy he called brother might be more. In King's Landing, the truth stirred like a rat in the shadows. Varys read the copy of the Raven's message and knew the game had changed. He whispered of it to Tyrion, who now served as hand in his father's absence. If the North unites behind Stark's survival, Cersei's grip weakens. Tyrion frowned. And if the dead rise, there might not be a throne to sit on. Varys nodded, fingers steepled. For once, my lord, we might have to fight a war that cannot be won with coin or whispers. Back at the wall, Ned stood at the top of the battlements, watching the snow fall heavier each day. He felt time slipping between his fingers. Every hour wasted was another night the White Walkers moved unseen. He turned as the lift groaned behind him. Manned there stood Jon Snow, older, sharper in the eyes, but still carrying the quiet intensity of youth. "Lord Stark," Jon said, unsure whether to bow. Ned didn't answer. He stepped forward and pulled Jon into an embrace. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick. Jon stood still, arms at his side, shocked. "For what?" he asked softly. "For everything I didn't tell you," Ned said. "For what I let you believe, and for what I must say now." They sat by the fire as the truth unraveled like an old cloak. "Your mother wasn't a common girl. Her name was Lyanna." Jon flinched. "Lyanna Stark. She was my sister," Ned said, "and you were her son. Her dying wish was that I protect you, and I did. I lied to everyone." Jon stared at the flames. "And my father." Ned's face was unreadable. Hagar Targaryen, the name fell like a hammer. Silence sat between them like a third ghost. "So I'm not a bastard." "You are many things," Ned said, "but never that." Jon stood slowly. "Why now? Why tell me this now?" "Because you need to know what you are, and what's coming." Jon looked out into the night beyond the wall. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "Survive," Ned said, "and lead." Jon said nothing, but in his eyes something ancient stirred, something colder than the wall, and stronger than any bloodline. As dawn broke, ravens flew from Castle Black in all directions, not with threats, not with politics, but with warnings of death. And in Winterfell, Bran Stark dreamed of wolves and dragons, of three-eyed ravens and white shadows. His eyes opened in the dark. "They're coming," he whispered, "and no one north or southward be ready." Snow fell heavier now, like ash from a sky mourning its own death. At Castle Black, the air had a stillness that wasn't silence, it was a warning. Ned Stark stood atop the wall with Jon beside him, the two figures cloaked in black, bound by truth and blood. "I never thought I'd see the wall again," Ned murmured, "and now it's all that stands between the living and the dead," Jon replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. Ravens had flown to Winterfell, to Riverrun, even to Dragonstone. Many ignored them, others scoffed. Some like Davos, Seaworth and Samwell, Tarly began to believe. But belief alone wouldn't save them. It was the 13th night since the last horn had sounded 3 blasts. The dead were near. The watch prepared, though their numbers were thin. Blacksmiths worked day and night to forge dragonglass weapons from what little they had recovered. Obsidian, once nothing but strange decoration, had become sacred. Jon moved through the yard, sparring with the newest recruits' boys, 2 young men, too broken. But they learned quickly, because they had to. Sam returned from the libraries of Old Town with ancient texts and maps. He confirmed that White Walkers were real, and their weakness was not myth. Valyrian steel, dragonglass, fire, he explained breathlessly to Ned. We may have hope, but not time. That night, Ned wrote his final letter to Robb, son. The true enemy marches not under a lion or a dragon, but behind a mask of ice. Turn north, bring your bannermen, or you will have no home left to defend. He sealed it with the direwolf sigil, though he knew it might not be enough. Pride in the north ran deep, and Robb was still fighting for the past, but the future was coming without mercy. In the south, Cersei dismissed the threat. Dead men walking, foolish northern tales, she hissed. Let them freeze. Tyrion was less certain. He had seen too many strange things to laugh so easily now. And in the east, Daenerys Targaryen, now surrounded by uneasy allies, read Ned Stark's letter with a frown. If this is true, then the Iron Throne means nothing. Ser Jorah nodded. It never did, Your Grace, not compared to this. Back at the wall, the night finally broke. The horn blew once, then again, then a third time. Jon's blood turned to ice. They're here. Torches were lit, gates reinforced. Every man, every sword was summoned. Ned stood in the courtyard, armored in black and silver, a Stark reborn. And then they came, silent like snow, a wall of shadows moving in unison, figures with eyes that burned blue, skin pale and cracked, dragging blades that reeked of death. At their center, towering on a dead horse, was the Night King. Jon led the charge, Ghost leaping ahead like a white storm. Arrows flew, fire blazed, steel clashed, screams filled the cold air. Ned fought like the north itself fold, fierce and unyielding. He cut down wights with precision, his dragonglass dagger glowing in the dark. Every time he fell, he rose again, not through magic, but through rage. And beside him, Jon fought with fury that shook even the dead. He met a White Walker in single combat, parrying its frost blade with Lungclaw, sparks flying in the night. But for every one they felled, 5 more took its place. Sam was nearly taken torn from behind, but Grenn dragged him out. Others weren't so lucky, and then the Night King raised his hands. The fallen stirred. Brothers of the Knights. Watch rose with blue eyes. Even death was not an escape. Ned's heart broke as he watched former friends turn into enemies. We can't win this, a voice cried. But Jon stood firm. We hold until dawn. Above them, the wall groaned, and far away, Bran Stark saw it all in a vision of snow and ruin. The end wasn't just near. It had already begun. The night raged on with no mercy. Castle Black, once a bastion of the forgotten, had become the last stand of the living. Snow blanketed the blood-soaked ground, stained with black and red. Whites poured through breaches in the defences like a flood with no tide. Ned Stark moved with a precision born of purpose. Every swing of his dragonglass axe cut down another of the dead. But his arms ached, and the frostbite on his fingers crept higher. Around him, screams shattered into silence. The watch was breaking. Jon stood atop the main gate, eyes locked with the Night King below. Their standoff felt timeless, 2 legacies staring across an abyss carved by fire and ice. He's not just leading them, Jon said, almost to himself. He is them. Ned approached, breathing hard. We need to fall. Back to where? Jon asked. To survival. There's no victory, here only a chance to warn the others. Jon didn't answer. His knuckles whitened on Longclaw's hilt. "We'll never get another chance." "If I can draw him out, no," Ned said firmly. "That's not your fate." Jon turned sharply. "You don't get to say that." "I do," Ned said, voice low, "because I failed you before. I stayed silent when the truth mattered. I let you grow up thinking you were nothing. I won't let you die believing it again." Jon's eyes burned not with tears, but fire. "Then fight with me." "I will," Ned said. "But we're fighting to escape, not to win." Below, a massive groan shattered the air. The wall cracked spider-webbed across its ancient face. And then, with a sound like the sky itself collapsing, a section of it gave way. Ice and stone thundered down. Whites surged through the breach like rats from a broken barrel. "We need to go now," Sam yelled, clutching a bloodied scroll in one hand and a burning blade in the other. "I found it away south." Gren, Et, and the remaining brothers fought to hold the gate. Ghost tore through the undead, red staining his white coat. They didn't run, they retreated, bleeding and cursing, toward the tunnels beneath the wall. Sam led the way, clutching the ancient map from old. "There's an old tunnel that leads to a wildling escape path. It's not frozen over." The air grew tighter as they ran. Behind them, Castle Black was burning orange and blue flames dancing against the snowstorm. The screams became echoes. The firelight turned the snow crimson, and the Night King stood silently amidst the chaos, unmoving, watching them flint in defeat. But in calculation, Ned, Jon, Sam, and a handful of survivors emerged into the snowfield beyond the wall, breath ragged, clothes torn, souls bruised. They had survived, but they had not. One in the distance, wildling scouts, waited Tormund among them. He saw Jon and grinned. "Told you the dead walk. Took you long enough." "They don't walk," Jon muttered. "They devour." Ned turned to Sam. "Get the word out. To the Vale, to Dragonstone, even to the south." Sam nodded. "They won't believe us." "They will," Ned said, "because they'll see the fire in your eyes. The kind you can only get when you've seen death and lived." Far to the south, Robb Stark's forces marched through the Riverlands, banners flapping against a growing wind. Crows followed them, not just carrion, but watchers of something worse, and in Winterfell, Bran Stark woke from a vision, sweat freezing on his brow. "They're breaking the wall," he whispered. "Father, Jon, they're not safe." He looked at Meera. "We must go to them." "But the north." "There is no north," Bran said. "Not anymore." The living were splintering. The dead were gathering, and in the east, Daenerys stood on the deck of her ship, gazing toward a frozen land. "They need fire," she said. "Then we give them dragons," Tyrion replied. "But even dragons may not be enough." The wind howled like a dying god. Snow and smoke churned together, smothering the sky into a sickly grey rut. Across the battered land north of the wall, armies moved, not for conquest, but for survival. Jon Snow rode at the head of the survivors from Castle Black, now joined by wildlings, northern scouts, and a small detachment of the Vale. Beside him rode Ned Stark, face hard as iron, the past weighing heavy on every breath. Behind them, the world was falling apart. The dead had broken the wall. Now they marched south, relentless, patient, endless. Villages vanished overnight. Rivers froze in unnatural shapes, and the sun had not been seen for 3 days. But fire was coming. From the east, Daenerys Targaryen descended with her dragons, the sky splitting as Dragon and Rhaegal roared through the storm. Snow melted beneath their wings. For a moment, hope surged through the hearts of the desperate Dot in Winterfell. Bran Stark waited in silence, eyes milky white, lost in visions of the past and futures, too broken to speak aloud. He whispered to the trees, to the wolves, to the very bones of the north. "They are not coming for war," he said. "They are coming for silence." When the two forces finally met on the frozen plains of Last Hearth, the earth itself seemed to tremble. Jon approached Daenerys. They had spoken little since she arrived. Too much weight hung between them, truths unspoken, bloodlines revealed, destinies tangled. "I need you to burn the Night King," Jon said simply. "Everything else falls apart if he lives." Daenerys nodded. "I'll do it myself." Ned stood back, watching them both. He had not told her what he knew. Not yet. The time would come, if they lived. The army of the dead arrived without sound. Just a wall of white and bone stretching across the horizon. At their center, the Night King raised a sword of frozen flame, and the battle began. DRAGONFIRE met ice. Spears met talons. Steel met silence. Daenerys and Rhaegal dove toward the Night King, their flame lighting up the blizzard. But the Night King raised his hand, and with a cruel flick of the wrist, spears of ice launched upward. Rhaegal screamed. Blood and fire spiraled from the sky. Daenerys fell. Ned saw her dragon crash into the snow, and he charged forward, not toward her, but toward Jon, who was now locked in a duel with a White Walker. "I'll hold them," Ned yelled. "Get to him." Jon nodded and broke through the melee. The Night King was waiting. Steel clanged, Longclaw met Frostblade. Jon fought like a storm, but the Night King was tireless, ancient. Every strike Jon landed seemed to do nothing. Every parry grew heavier, and then out of the shadows came Arya. Silent, swift, the same blade that felled the Night King in another life now, aimed again, but this time he turned. He caught her mid-air. Her blade fell, but Jon used the moment. He drove Longclaw through the Night King's chest stand as the blade touched his frozen heart. It glowed with fire. For a breath, nothing moved. Then the Night King shattered screaming, cracking into ice and ash. Across the battlefield, the dead fell. Every white collapsed. Every White Walker turned to shards. Silence, real silence. And then the weeping began. They had won, but it had cost them everything. Daenerys was pulled from the snow, burned but breathing. Rhaegal's corpse steamed in the frost. Ghost limped. Sam wept over fallen brothers. The wall was gone. The watch broken. Jon stood over the ashes of the Night King, breathing like a dying man. Ned approached him slowly. "It's over," Jon said. "No," Ned replied. "It's beginning." He handed Jon the scroll that Maester Aemon had sealed before his death. The truth of Jon's birth, the blood of ice and fire. "You must take it south," Ned said. "Let them choose, truth or war." Jon shook his head. "I want no crown." "Good," Ned said. "That's how I know you're worthy of it." In Winterfell, Bran opened his eyes and whispered, "He's ready." The snow began to melt, and the Game of Thrones had been broken, not by steel or schemes, but by a bastard boy who is never truly a bastard, and a man who once bent the knee too soon, but stood again when it mattered most. Eddard Stark had lived long enough to see his legacy rise, and for the first time in years, he felt peace.